correct and
which is the corporate control that corporations have over our government. I had Fred Barnes sitting where you are a couple of weeks ago, and he has a book about the president called Rebel in Chief, and I said, well, he may be a rebel in many ways, but isn't the most important way a president could be a rebel in this day and age, in this country, would be to stand up against corporations?
You couldn't be more correct, and the idea that this is a CEO president at a time when corporate America, U.S. multinationals, have an absolutely dominant position, and I mean absolutely dominant position in American politics, holding absolute sway over our political system. It's a terrible time to be called a CEO president. We need, as you suggested, a renegade rebel president willing to represent the people, a Congress willing and able to represent the American people.
So I know when I say that names like Ralph Nader and Ross Perot, those are two people who could never be elected in America, but aren't they the guys who really had it right on this issue? Wasn't Ross Perot the guy who wanted to be the St. Patrick of K Street and drive the lobbyists out of Washington? And isn't Ralph Nader, isn't that his big issue, the one we're talking about now with corporations?
Well, Ralph Nader, I think, is a man who was ahead of his time in so many ways. Everyone understands what he's done in terms of the Corvair. But his insistence upon higher standards of public conduct in this country, I think, are to be venerated and respected by the last two generations of Americans who have seen the political system degenerate into nothing more than a brokerage for corporate money moving through lobbyists' hands into the pockets of campaigns for both parties. I would say to you, Bill, that the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans right now is no more than the most technical word I can think of, a skosh. They are both dominated by corporate money.
Well, except... I agree. Wait. Who do you think has been the better steward of the economy, though? Because I know when people think of the economy, they still tend to think of Jimmy Carter, Democrat. But if you look at the stats, it's not really that way, is it?
Historically, no, it's not. I think a great example is we're hearing the results of outsourcing American jobs to cheap overseas labor markets as we are watching manufacturing jobs disappear in this economy, as we're listening to a president begin to talk about our dependency on foreign oil when we're dependent for 96% of our clothing on overseas manufacturers, 70% of our computers, 70%, at least 75% of our consumer electronics. And we need to talk about, says this administration and many in Congress, to re-educate the dumb American worker. I think the difference is not that a Democratic president or a Republican president, although you can infer it. The fact is, I think Americans were just a lot smarter 5 years ago when at the end of the decade of the 90s we had created 22 million jobs, which they were perfectly capable of doing, and then we watched 3 million manufacturing jobs disappear over the last 3 years. So obviously in the last 5 years, it's just that Americans have become very, very stupid.
I agree. Thank you. Lou Dobbs, everybody.
Good to be with you.
All right,
The idea